In the basement storage rooms of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there is a mummy that has no name. Not officially, not anymore. It sits in a climate-controlled case behind a catalog number, KV55, surrounded by fragments of gilded wood and shattered alabaster. Most visitors never see it. Most scholars who have seen it disagree about what they're looking at. The coffin that once held it was made of solid gold foil over wood, inlaid with carnelian and lapis lazuli. It was one of the most expensive burial containers ever recovered from the Valley of the Kings. But the face had been ripped off, and every single inscription that should have told us who this person was had been deliberately, systematically cut out of the gold. Not worn away, not faded, cut out. Someone in ancient Egypt did not want this person to be remembered. And for over a century, Egyptologists assumed they knew why. They assumed they knew who this was. They built an entire historical narrative around that assumption. And then, in 2010, a DNA study funded by the Egyptian government published its results. And quietly, without headlines, without press conferences, the data inside that study suggested that the mummy in that coffin might not be the person we were told it was at all. This is not a fringe theory. This is the peer-reviewed science. And if the data is right, then the official history of one of Egypt's most famous dynasties has been wrong for 100 years. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter. If this kind of investigation is something you want more of, subscribe right now. This channel goes deep. It began on January 6th, 1907. A young archaeologist named Edward Ayrton was working under the direction of American lawyer Theodore Davis in the Valley of the Kings, near Luxor. Davis was not a trained Egyptologist. He was a wealthy patron who had purchased the excavation concession for the valley, and he liked to be present for discoveries. On that morning, Ayrton's crew found a sealed doorway in a small, undecorated corridor tomb. A tomb that had no designation, no precedent, nothing like the royal burial chambers that surrounded it. 3 days later, on January 9, Ayrton opened it. Davis entered alongside him. So did artist Joseph Lyndon Smith and the antiquities inspector Arthur Weigel. What they found inside stopped them cold. The tomb was a single corridor. No side chambers, no painted walls, but the floor was covered in objects. A gilded wooden shrine bearing the name of Queen Tiye, the great royal wife of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Canopic jars bearing the likeness of a woman. Magic bricks stamped with the name of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who had dismantled Egypt's entire religious order. And in the center of the chamber, a coffin of extraordinary quality, glittering under lamplight, the coffin of a queen, decorated with feathered wings and gold foil and inscriptions. But the cartouches had been gouged out, and the mummy inside it was not a queen. Anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith examined the remains in Cairo later that year and confirmed it. The skeletal structure was male. A woman's coffin, a man's bones, and a name that had been erased. For decades, scholars dismissed it as symbolic. They said the erasure was political, a consequence of the religious backlash that followed Akhenaten's death, when Egypt's traditional priesthood reclaimed power and systematically destroyed the heretic king's legacy. The assumption became consensus. This was Akhenaten, the royal who had moved the capital, abolished the old gods, declared the sun disk At as the only deity, and upended 3,000 years of civilization. His successors erased him from the record. His city was demolished. His monuments were defaced. And his body, this theory said, was hastily reburied in an anonymous tomb in a coffin that wasn't even his, with his name carved out before anyone could pray for him. That was the official story. But that explanation has a problem. Several problems, actually. Here's where it gets strange. The first clue is the age of the body. When Grafton Elliott Smith examined the KV-55 mummy in 1907, He estimated the man had died between the ages of 25 and 26 years old. Now, Akhenaten is known to have reigned for at least 17 years. He appears in inscriptions and records from the early years of his reign as a young man and from the final years of his reign as a mature adult. If he reigned for 17 years and died at 25, he would have become pharaoh at approximately the age of 8. Possible, but deeply problematic, because the early records of his reign describe a man making complex theological decisions and overseeing the design of an entirely new capital city. Not the work of an 8-year-old, even a divine one. The mainstream response to this discrepancy was to simply dismiss Smith's estimate. By 2010, the official line had shifted. The bones indicated a man between 35 and 45 years at death, which would align comfortably with Akhenaten's known reign length. But other bone specialists, particularly Mark Gaboldi, one of the leading authorities on the Amarna period, examined the same skeletal evidence and concluded the opposite. The epiphyseal fusion, the way the long bones seal at the ends during adulthood, suggested the man died younger than 30, not older. The same bones. Two teams, opposite conclusions. Not similar conclusions. Not a minor difference. The opposite. This is not standard scientific disagreement. When forensic specialists examining the same skeleton produce age estimates 20 years apart, something is wrong with the process. Either the methodology was flawed, or the pressure to confirm a pre-existing conclusion was shaping the results. And there is a third possibility. Both teams may be describing the same bones accurately, because the bones may belong to someone who was simply not who anyone assumed. The second clue is the coffin itself. When the KV-55 coffin was examined in detail, it became clear it had not originally been made for the person inside it. The dimensions were wrong for a male body. It was shorter, narrower through the shoulders, wider at the hips. The inscriptions, before they were removed, were written in the feminine grammatical form. The coffin had been made for a woman. Scholars proposed it had originally been made for Kia, a mysterious secondary wife of Akhenaten, who appears prominently in the Amarna record and then vanishes completely around year 12 of his reign. If Kia died or fell from favor, the theory runs, her burial equipment was repurposed. But repurposed coffins were not standard royal procedure. You do not bury a pharaoh, a god on earth, in a converted woman's coffin unless something has gone profoundly wrong, unless the burial was rushed, unless it was secret, unless the person inside was not being honored, but hidden. It was sealed, it was stripped of identity, and then it disappeared from the record for 3,000 years. Then, modern science found something that changed everything. In February 2010, a team led by Zahi Hawass, then Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, published the results of a genetic study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The paper was titled Ancestry and Pathology in King Tutankhamun's Family. Using short tandem repeat analysis, a form of DNA fingerprinting, the team analyzed 11 royal mummies, including Tutankhamun, the KV-55 mummy, and several unidentified females found in a side chamber of tomb KV-35. The results were sweeping. The elder woman from KV-35, long unidentified, matched the genetic profile of Queen Tiye, Akhenaten's mother. A younger female from the same chamber was identified as the mother of Tutankhamun, and the KV-55 mummy was identified as Tutankhamun's father, the son of Amenhotep III, the father of Tutankhamun. By all genealogical accounting, this was Akhenaten. That was the headline. But buried in the supplementary data, the part most news articles did not cover was the age estimate. The same study placed the age of the KV-55 mummy at death as somewhere between 35 and 45. They committed to this figure. They said it supported the Akhenaten identification. But several independent bioarchaeologists noted something the team had not sufficiently addressed. The bone density measurements and fusion markers in the published CT scans were inconsistent with a man in his late 30s. They were more consistent with someone in his mid to late 20s. The data in the paper and the conclusion of the paper did not fully agree. The full CT scan data was never publicly released for independent verification. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. There is no smoking inscription, no competing body, no rival tomb with a proven occupant. The simplest explanation, that KV-55 is Akhenaten, that the age estimates carry error margins, that the coffin reuse was a political emergency, and that the cartouche removal was the standard posthumous persecution of a heretic king, remains viable. And, for many researchers, it remains sufficient. But that doesn't make the discovery ordinary, because here is the third clue, and it is the one that makes the others irrelevant if you follow it to its conclusion. Akhenaten had a co-regent, a figure who appears in the last years of the Amarna period under the name Smenkhkare. This individual appears on monuments alongside Akhenaten, sometimes in positions that would typically be reserved for a queen. Some scholars believe Smenkhkare was a male co-regent who ruled briefly after Akhenaten's death, and before Tutankhamun took the throne. Some believe Smenkhkare was Nefertiti, Akhenaten's great royal wife, ruling under a male name. And some believe Smenkhkare was a royal son, born of a secondary wife, elevated to secure the line of succession during a dynasty in crisis. They weren't guessing, they were recording. Every monument, every stela, every inscription that references Smenkhkare was later destroyed. Not by accident, not by neglect. Every single reference to this person was targeted, just like the cartouches in the KV-55 coffin. The erasure is too systematic to be coincidental. Someone was trying to erase not just a name, but a story. And if the KV-55 mummy is Smenkhkare, not Akhenaten, then we do not know where Akhenaten is buried. We have never found his tomb. His body has never been confirmed. The most important, most radical, most history-altering pharaoh in Egyptian history. The man who rewrote an entire civilization's theology, who built a city from nothing in the desert, who declared himself and his wife living gods of a new religion, simply disappeared from the archaeological record. Not misidentified, not mislabeled, gone. What that would mean is staggering. It would mean that either Akhenaten's tomb has never been found, that it is still sealed, still buried, possibly beneath the sand of Amarna, possibly beneath the Valley of the Kings, in a corridor no expedition has yet entered. Or it would mean that his burial was so thoroughly destroyed by his successors that nothing of it survives. No body, no coffin, no grave goods. Deliberately unmade, the KV-55 mummy is still in Cairo. The coffin fragments are still in storage. The face never recovered. The cartouches never restored. The CT scan data has still not been released in full. The debate over the age at death has still not been resolved by independent analysis. A peer-reviewed article published as recently as 2021 stated plainly that the identity of the KV-55 mummy must remain open, that the scientific community reached a consensus before the evidence warranted one. And that consensus has calcified into fact in the popular record, even as specialists continue to dispute it in academic journals that most people will never read. The man in that coffin was real. He died. He was powerful enough to be buried in gold. He was dangerous enough that someone carved his name out of the record before the tomb was sealed. And for 118 years, we have been filing him under a name that the science does not fully support. Most people walk right past it. The coffin sits behind glass. The mummy lies in storage. And the desert at Amarna, the site of Akhenaten's lost city, the place he built and the place his enemies tried to erase, still has sections that have never been excavated to bedrock. Ground-penetrating radar surveys from 2014 through 2020 found anomalies in the substratum beneath the royal wadi at Amarna. Cavities, chambers, features that do not match the natural geology. They have not been opened. The man with no name is waiting. And somewhere, perhaps, the man we thought was him is still waiting too. If this investigation left you with more questions than answers, that's exactly how it should feel. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you want to go deeper into the mysteries of the Amarna royal family, the video playing next takes you inside the evidence for Nefertiti's hidden tomb, a discovery that was reported, then quietly removed from the published record. Start watching.